Part 2. Where was I? Compared to the Hieronymus property, the Gimlins seem to have done nicely for themselves. The Gimlins' home has always been well maintained and nicely painted, and the landscaping nicely manicured. The Gimlins always had nicer, newer vehicles in their driveway, too. The Hieronymus family could never keep up with those Joneses. It was a formula for envy in a small western town. Hieronymus had been telling people in Yakima bars for years that he would someday find a way to make money off the Patterson Gimlin film, like his famous neighbor did. Bob Gimlin never made any money off the Patterson Gimlin film, though many people around Yakima assumed he did. When Hieronymus was asked, during an in-depth, on-camera interview, why he was coming forward 40 years after the fact, his reply confused the interviewer a bit. Hieronymus said, "All these people have been making money off that footage for years. It's my turn now." See that interview below. He was referring to all the other people who had claimed to be involved with the footage, who Hieronymus assumed made money from their claims. It was time for him to get a piece of that action. Gimlin's life story is an inspiring one. It was a progression of achievements, then harsh setbacks, and then even bigger achievements. He began working in Washington's apple orchards at age 10, and worked continuously throughout World War II. When he was old enough, he joined the Navy and eventually became a champion Navy boxer. His Navy boxing career was cut short by an auto accident. The accident left him severely injured and hospitalized for more than a year. As soon as he could walk again, Gimlin went back to work, doing everything from construction to demolition to horse training to rodeo riding, usually holding 2 jobs and working late hours. He did this until he could train horses full time. Today, in his 70s, Gimlin still works part-time as a horse trainer. He breaks and trains a particular breed of horse, the sure-footed, quiet-stepping Rocky Mountain horse. It's the ideal form of transportation for sneaking up on skittish wild animals. Gimlin's wife, Judy, also worked diligently for decades. She began as a bank teller at the oldest savings and loan in Yakima. She eventually advanced to the rank of corporate officer for that savings and loan chain. She retired a few years ago after 40 years with the same employer. At one point during their younger years, Gimlin and Hieronymus were both hired by the same large industrial employer in Yakima, along with many other men in Yakima. In time, Bob Gimlin became a valuable employee for the company, whereas Bob Hieronymus showed little motivation and opted to perform light janitorial work around the facility. He swept up a bit, and changed his sprinkler head every so often, and spent a lot of time in the coffee room. His supervisors eventually transferred him to a different facility. There he was kept busy stacking empty pallets and making deliveries of sodas. From Hieronymus' own statements, one can sense his envy of Gimlin's prosperity, and his feeling of being cheated out of that same level of prosperity. Hieronymus wanted to believe, and wanted his wife to believe, that Gimlin's success was the product of a dishonest scheme, rather than the product of a better work ethic. Roger Patterson holding cast at Bluff Creek following the incident. Patterson and Gimlin were both quintessentially Western characters, in a quintessentially Western moment. 2 tough, brave entrepreneurs on horseback, each with his own special talents and skills, including rodeo riding. They had all the right stuff at that moment in 1967 to film a fleeting encounter with an ancient legend. Believing and preaching that Gimlin's prosperity derived from a hoax kind of sort of justified Hieronymus' own hoax, and also rationalized his own lack of success in life. For many years, Hieronymus grumbled to folks in Yakima bars that his neighbor's good fortune did not come from honest work, but rather from proceeds of the Patterson Gimlin film. The primary writer of the book promoting the new Confession is a man named Greg Long. Greg Long came to this book project with a definite agenda for casting doubt and aspersions on the Patterson creature. His path to undermining the creature was to characterize the filmographer as a petty crook. Now, people around Yakima are talking about their dealings with him and the stories they say he distorted and stretched in his book. The book was designed to attach itself to any future debate about the subject, a debate that has become a fixture in many writing and journalism classes at the high school level and undergrad level. In the video above, Cal Korff talks about his involvement with Greg Long, Bob Hieronymus, and the making of Bigfoot. Gimlin's association with the famous footage, and the common assumption that it was a hoax, became such an annoyance to him and his wife by the end of the 1970s that he eventually refused to speak about the matter publicly for nearly 3 decades, until he learned of his envious neighbor's phony story about wearing the costume. That's when Gimlin finally broke his long silence. When Greg Long was assembling the book featuring Hieronymus' confession, Gimlin was not yet talking. The parasitic trio, Long, Korff, Hieronymus, assumed he would never talk to the press because he had avoided the press during the previous Patterson debunking scams. It was a bad gamble. Nowadays, Gimlin attends Bigfoot conferences every so often. He is not shy to discuss things, especially the lies of Hieronymus, Korff, and Long, their lies about himself and about Roger Patterson. Hieronymus' late-blooming confession is debunkable in various ways, listed further down in this article. Certain aspects are debunkable by author John Green. Other aspects are debunkable by Bob Gimlin and or Patricia Patterson, Roger Patterson's widow. Both still live in different parts of Yakima, and both are available to speak to qualified journalists about this particular subject. As it turns out, some of the Yakima residents who were quoted by Greg Long in his book now say their stories and comments about Roger were distorted in his book. They say Long seemed to be on a mission to make Roger Patterson out to be a petty criminal. Roger was an unsophisticated cowboy, but a highly motivated, multi-skilled cowboy with big aspirations. Only a few years after obtaining the footage, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He died in 1972 at the age of 38. Apparently, and not surprisingly, Roger had not repaid all his personal debts, or completed all his planned projects, or returned all his borrowed items, before his cancer put him into the bed where he eventually died. People who die of cancer in their prime of life often leave behind a lot of loose ends and debts. Does that make them petty criminals? Greg Long would have you think so. Greg Long told folks around Yakima that Roger Patterson made a heap of money from the famous footage, and he, Greg Long, wanted to find anyone who was owed money by Patterson, or who would otherwise bear witness against him, as Long claimed everybody in town was doing. For example, Bob Hieronymus claims Roger owed him $1,000 for wearing the costume in the footage. The real story behind the Patterson-Gimlin film. The real story behind the PG film is a remarkable intersection of uniquely Western talents, bravery, and entrepreneurial motivation. Had Gimlin not been a gifted handler of quiet-stepping Rocky Mountain horses, and had Patterson not been a seasoned rodeo rider, with a strong drive to make a documentary about Sasquatches, the footage would probably not exist. When the two men came into view of the creature, Roger's normally unspookable mountain horse reared up in panic and fell over on him. Roger's leg was pinned to the ground. With the thrashing horse pinning him to the ground, he pulled himself out from underneath it and whipped out a 16mm camera from a saddlebag, and then dashed toward the fleeing figure, finally steadying his aim as it walked away. It all happened faster than it takes to describe. You get a sense of how fast it actually happened when you watch the unstabilized full version of the footage. It was a violent burst of energy and motion, then a quickly steady control of his body and hands, the characteristic maneuvers of a seasoned rodeo rider. Patterson was not a hoaxer. Patterson was an authentic cowboy on an authentic cowboy mission. He accomplished that mission on the afternoon of October 20th, 1967, and then died from cancer a few years later, probably due to his cowboy lifestyle. Hieronymus links himself to the footage. In 2005, a Seattle TV station produced an episode for Evening Magazine which focused on the Hieronymus claims. This program took a much more critical approach than the Is It Real segment with Hieronymus. They also included clips of Canadian author John Green refuting the claims of Hieronymus. See also the article written by Canadian Bill Miller, mentioning other factors relevant to the credibility of Hieronymus' story, or lack thereof. Even though the Hieronymus story is bogus, many people will claim they heard the Patterson-Gimlin film was proven to be a hoax for years to come because of him and that National Geographic documentary from 2005. The 2005 documentary on the National Geographic Channel was titled Bigfoot, Is It Real? You can watch the entire documentary by clicking the vertical icon on the left. The parasite trio, Long, Korff, and Hieronymus, managed to use this documentary to promote their deceptive book, The Making of Bigfoot. Before the book's release, Long and Korff warned and promised, Biscardi-esque style, that the book would blow the lid off the subject. End Part 2.